Imagine this, a perfect life shattered in an instant. Sarah, a devoted wife 7 months pregnant, discovers her millionaire husband Marcus isn't just cheating with her best friend Bethany, but plotting to steal everything she owns, including their unborn child. What starts as a heartbreaking betrayal spirals into a high-stakes game of deception, FBI intrigue, hidden identities, and ruthless revenge. Will Sarah freeze his accounts, expose his dark secrets, and reclaim her future? Or will the millionaire's regrets come too late? This gripping tale of empowerment and justice will keep you on the edge of your seat from start to finish. Stick around to hear the full story. It's packed with twists you won't see coming. If you're loving this drama as much as I am, smash that like button, drop a comment with your predictions, share it with a friend who needs some revenge inspiration, and hit subscribe for more thrilling stories every week. Let's dive in. Sarah Chen Rodriguez adjusted her designer maternity dress for the third time as she sat in the plush waiting room of Manhattan's most exclusive obstetrics clinic at 7 months pregnant. She still couldn't believe how blessed she was. Her husband Marcus had built a tech empire worth millions. Their Hamptons estate was featured in Architectural Digest, and their marriage seemed like something out of a fairy tale. Mrs. Rodriguez. The nurse's voice cut through her daydreaming. Dr. Morrison will see you now. Sarah smiled, placing her hand protectively over her rounded belly. This pregnancy had come as a surprise after years of trying, but at 38, she felt like she was finally living her purpose. After leaving her marketing career to support Marcus's business ventures, motherhood would give her life new meaning. The ultrasound gel felt cold against her skin as Dr. Morrison moved the wand across her stomach. Everything looks perfect. Sarah, your little boy is developing beautifully. Sarah's eyes filled with tears of joy as she watched her son move on the monitor. This was the moment she dreamed of her entire adult life. The perfect husband, the perfect home, and now the perfect baby. I just need to update your emergency contacts, the nurse said, pulling up Sarah's file on her tablet. Let's see. We have Marcus Rodriguez as primary contact, and the nurse paused, frowning at the screen. What is it? Sarah asked, wiping the gel from her belly. There seems to be an error in our system. It shows a second emergency contact listed as your husband's wife, Bethany Williams Rodriguez. The blood drained from Sarah's face. Bethany Williams had been her college roommate, her maid of honor, her closest friend for 15 years. She was also Marcus's business partner in his latest venture. That can't be right, Sarah whispered, but her hands were already shaking. The nurse looked embarrassed. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Rodriguez. This must be a clerical error. We'll get it sorted out right away. But Sarah barely heard her. Her mind was racing through every interaction she'd witnessed between Marcus and Bethany over the past few months. The way they finished each other's sentences during business meetings. How Bethany always seemed to know Marcus's schedule better than Sarah did. The expensive jewelry Bethany had been wearing lately, far beyond what her nonprofit salary could afford. Sarah stumbled out of the clinic in a daze, her Louis Vuitton maternity bag clutched to her chest. The December rain was falling harder now, matching the storm brewing in her heart. She sat in her white Mercedes in the parking garage, staring at the ultrasound photos scattered across her lap. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her pregnancy. Instead, it felt like the beginning of the end. With trembling fingers, she dialed her sister Jennifer's number. Jen, I need you, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah, what's wrong? Is it the baby? I think Marcus is having an affair. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like hours. With who? Jennifer finally asked. Bethany. Another pause. Oh, honey, are you sure? Sarah closed her eyes, rain streaking down the windows of her car like tears. The hospital has her listed as Marcus's wife on their emergency contact form. That has to be a mistake. Does it? Sarah's pregnancy hormones amplified every emotion? Think about it, Jen. How many late nights has Marcus been working lately? How many business trips with Bethany? How many times has she been at our house when I'm not there? As Sarah spoke, memories flooded back with painful clarity. Bethany knowing where Marcus kept his important documents. Bethany having the alarm code to their Hamptons house. Bethany wearing a tennis bracelet identical to the one Marcus had given Sarah for their anniversary, claiming it was a gift from her mysterious new boyfriend who she never seemed to introduce to anyone. "I'm coming over," Jennifer said. "No," Sarah replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "I need to go home. I need to see for myself." The drive from Manhattan to their Westchester estate normally took 45 minutes, but Sarah found herself driving slower than usual, dreading what she might find. She thought about all the episodes of The Good Wife she'd watched, never imagining she'd be living her own version of Alicia Florrick's nightmare. The electronic gates of their property opened with their usual quiet efficiency. Sarah pulled into the circular driveway, noting that both Marcus's Porsche and Bethany's Tesla were parked outside. That wasn't unusual. They often worked from Marcus's home office, but today it felt ominous. Sarah let herself in through the front door, her heels clicking on the marble foyer. The house was quiet except for voices coming from upstairs. Her heart pounded as she climbed the sweeping staircase, each step feeling like she was walking toward her own execution. The voices were coming from their master bedroom. Sarah paused outside the door, her hand on the handle, gathering courage for what she might see. She pushed the door open and froze. Marcus and Bethany were indeed in her bedroom, but they weren't tangled in her Egyptian cotton sheets as she'd expected. Instead, they were sitting at Marcus's antique desk, papers spread between them, pens in their hands. "Sarah!" Marcus jumped up, his face flushing. "You're early. How did the appointment go?" But Sarah wasn't looking at her husband. She was staring at the documents on the desk. Legal papers, bank statements, what looked like property deeds. "What's going on here?" Sarah asked, her voice surprisingly steady. Marcus and Bethany exchanged a look that Sarah couldn't interpret. "We need to talk," Marcus said, his tone suddenly serious. "About the businesses, about our future. There are some things you need to know." Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her belly as her baby kicked, as if sensing the tension in the room. Whatever was happening here, it was bigger than an affair, much bigger, and somehow that terrified her even more. Sarah sank onto the velvet chaise lounge at the foot of their bed, her designer maternity clothes suddenly feeling like a costume for a role she no longer understood. "What kind of thing?" She asked, though part of her already knew she didn't want to hear the answer. Marcus ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, a gesture Sarah had once found endearing, but now seemed calculated. "The IRS has been investigating some of our overseas investments," he began. "Bethany and I have been working to protect our assets, to protect you and the baby." Bethany, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "Sarah, you know how much Marcus loves you. Everything we've been doing is to make sure you and the baby are taken care of." The way Bethany said it made Sarah's skin crawl. There was something in her tone, something proprietary, as if she had a right to make decisions about Sarah's family. "What exactly have you been doing?" Sarah asked. Marcus gestured to the papers on the desk. "Moving money into more secure accounts, restructuring the business partnerships, standard wealthy family financial planning." But Sarah had worked in marketing for 10 years before her marriage. She understood business, even if Marcus had gradually excluded her from his financial decisions. What she was looking at didn't seem standard at all. "Why wasn't I included in these discussions?" Sarah asked. "These are my assets too, aren't they?" Another look passed between Marcus and Bethany. This time, Sarah caught it fully. It was the look of two people who shared secrets, two people who had been making plans without her. "Of course they are, darling," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We just wanted to handle the complicated parts before involving you. You're pregnant. You shouldn't be stressing about financial details." Sarah felt a surge of anger that surprised her with its intensity. "Since when do you make decisions about what I should or shouldn't be stressed about?" "Since you became carrying my heir," Marcus replied, and something in his tone made Sarah's blood run cold. Your heir, Sarah repeated. You mean our son? Of course, that's what I meant. But Sarah was remembering things now. How Marcus had insisted on a prenuptial agreement that seemed one-sided at the time, but that her lawyer had assured her was standard for wealthy families. How he'd gradually convinced her to quit her job and focus on supporting his career. How her name had been removed from various accounts over the years for what he'd called tax purposes. I want to see all the documents, Sarah said, standing up with effort. I want to understand exactly what's been done with our money. Sarah, you don't need to worry about, Bethany started. I wasn't talking to you, Sarah snapped, her pregnancy hormones finally boiling over. In fact, why are you even here? Why are you in my bedroom, making decisions about my husband's business? Bethany's mask slipped for just a moment, and Sarah saw something ugly underneath. Satisfaction, possessiveness, victory. Because I'm not just Marcus's business partner anymore, Bethany said quietly. I'm his partner in every sense of the word. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, catching herself on the bedpost. What is she talking about? Marcus. Marcus looked between the two women, and Sarah saw him make a choice. The wrong choice. Sarah, sit down. Please. This isn't how I wanted you to find out. Find out what Bethany and we've fallen in love. It wasn't planned. It just happened. Sarah felt like she was drowning in her own bedroom. The air seemed too thick to breathe. You're having an affair. It's more than that, Bethany said, and Sarah heard genuine emotion in her voice for the first time. We're getting married as soon as your divorce is finalized. My divorce? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus pulled out a folder from the desk drawer. I've already filed the papers. Given your prenuptial agreement and the fact that all our major assets are in business entities, the process should be straightforward. Sarah stared at the divorce papers with her name on them. Papers she'd never seen before, never signed. You filed for divorce without telling me. We were going to discuss it after the baby was born, Marcus said. We thought it would be less stressful for everyone involved. Less stressful? Sarah almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Her husband was divorcing her to marry her best friend, and he thought timing it better would make it less stressful. The baby, Sarah said suddenly. What about our son? You'll have primary custody, of course, Marcus said. I'll provide child support. You'll be comfortable. Comfortable. As if comfort could replace a father. As if money could heal the wound of having her family destroyed before her child was even born. Sarah looked around the master bedroom they'd shared for 5 years. The room where they'd made love, where they'd planned their future, where she'd dreamed of bringing their newborn son home to. Now it felt like a mausoleum. I need some air, Sarah said, heading for the door. Sarah, wait, Marcus called. We should discuss the practical arrangements. The house, your living situation. My living situation, Sarah turned back, something dangerous sparking in her chest. Well, the house is in the business entity. Bethany and I will need it for entertaining clients, but we'll help you find something suitable. Maybe a nice condo in the city. Sarah stared at him. This man she'd loved for 7 years. This man whose child she was carrying, and realized she didn't know him at all. I see, she said quietly. She walked out of the bedroom with as much dignity as she could muster, but once she reached the marble staircase, her legs gave out. She sat on the steps, her hand on her belly, and for the first time since her teenage years, she had no idea what to do next. From upstairs, she could hear Marcus and Bethany talking in low voices. She caught fragments. Sooner than we planned. And financial arrangements. And she'll be fine once she accepts. Sarah pulled out her phone and did something she'd never thought she'd do. She opened the voice memo app and started recording. If Marcus thought she was going to disappear quietly into whatever suitable life he'd planned for her, he was about to learn just how wrong he could be. Because Sarah Chen Rodriguez had built a successful marketing career before she'd ever met Marcus. She understood strategy, she understood leverage, and she was about to get a very expensive education in both. The only question was whether she could learn fast enough to save herself and her son. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah discovered the betrayal, and she'd spent every day trying to understand the true scope of what Marcus and Bethany had done. What she'd found was worse than infidelity. It was systematic financial destruction. Sarah sat in the office of Patricia Wells, the divorce attorney Jennifer had recommended, surrounded by boxes of documents she'd managed to gather before Marcus changed the locks on his home office. "I have to ask you directly. Sarah," Patricia said, her expression grim, "did you sign any documents recently that you might not have read carefully?" Sarah's stomach dropped. "What kind of documents?" Patricia slid a stack of papers across her mahogany desk. "Property transfers, business restructuring agreements, investment reallocation forms." Sarah's hands shook as she recognized her own signature on page after page. "Marcus said these were routine business documents, tax paperwork. He said I didn't need to worry about the details. Unfortunately, what you signed were documents transferring your ownership stake in virtually every asset you and Marcus acquired during your marriage into a business entity controlled by Marcus and Bethany Williams." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means that according to these documents, you willingly gave up your claim to the Hamptons house, the Westchester estate, the art collection, the investment portfolio, and Marcus's business interests." Sarah felt like she was falling through space. "But I didn't know. I didn't understand what I was signing." "I believe you," Patricia said gently, "but proving fraud will be extremely difficult, especially given your prenuptial agreement." "What about the prenup?" Patricia pulled out another file. "Your prenuptial agreement is ironclad. In the event of divorce, you're entitled to a modest monthly allowance and the contents of your personal checking account. That's it." Sarah did quick math in her head. Her personal checking account had maybe $30,000. The monthly allowance Patricia mentioned wouldn't even cover the rent on a decent apartment in Westchester. How is that possible? "We built everything together. Technically, according to these documents, Marcus built everything. You were a supportive spouse who chose to leave the workforce to focus on family life. I left my job because Marcus asked me to, because he said he needed my support to grow the business. I understand, but legally, that's not how it reads." Sarah felt her baby kick forcefully, as if he sensed her distress. She placed both hands on her belly, trying to calm herself for his sake. "What are my options?" Patricia's expression grew even more serious. "Limited. We can challenge the prenup on grounds of fraud or duress, but that's a long shot. We can argue that you were coerced into signing the asset transfer documents, but Marcus's lawyers will claim you were a willing participant in financial planning. What if I can prove the affair started before the documents were signed? It might help establish a pattern of deception, but it won't automatically invalidate legal documents." Sarah leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of her situation settling on her like a heavy blanket. At 38, 7 months pregnant, she was about to become a single mother with no assets, no income, and no home. "There is one thing," Patricia said carefully. "What?" "Some of these business entities Marcus created appear to have been designed to hide assets from tax authorities. If that's the case, the IRS might be very interested in the information you've provided." Sarah looked up with the first spark of hope she'd felt in weeks. "You mean Marcus might be in legal trouble?" "Potentially. But Sarah, you need to understand that going after Marcus through tax authorities could take years, and it might not result in you recovering any assets. But it might stop him from getting away with this completely, possibly." Sarah gathered the documents, her mind already racing with possibilities. She might not be able to win her old life back, but she wasn't going to let Marcus and Bethany ride off into the sunset with everything they'd stolen from her. As she drove home to her sister's house, the only place she had to stay now, Sarah's phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. "Hello, Marcus." "Sarah, we need to talk. In person." "I don't think that's a good idea." "It's about the baby. There are some things we need to discuss before he's born." Something in Marcus's tone made Sarah pull over to the side of the road. What things? Medical decisions, custody arrangements, financial planning for his future. Financial planning. You mean the child support you're legally obligated to pay? Actually, Sarah, there might be some complications with that. Sarah's blood ran cold. What kind of complications? Given the business restructuring and the IRS investigation, my income situation has become quite complex. My lawyers think it might be better for everyone if we modify the custody arrangement. Modify it how? I think it would be best if I had primary custody. I can provide a stable home environment, private schools, the best health care, things you might struggle to afford on your own. Sarah gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. You want to take my baby? I want what's best for our son. And honestly, Sarah, given your emotional state lately, I'm concerned about your ability to provide adequate care. My emotional state, Sarah's voice was rising. You mean my reaction to discovering that my husband and best friend have been systematically stealing my life? That's exactly what I mean. The paranoia, the anger, the inability to accept reality. It's not healthy for you or the baby. Sarah realized what Marcus was doing. He wasn't just stealing her assets. He was building a case to steal her child. I have to go, she said. Sarah, wait. We should discuss. She hung up and immediately called Patricia Wells. Patricia, it's Sarah Rodriguez. I need to ask you something urgent. Can Marcus take custody of my baby? What's happened? Sarah explained the phone call, her voice shaking with rage and fear. He's laying groundwork, Patricia said grimly. Establishing a narrative that you're unstable and he's the responsible parent. It's a common tactic in high-stakes custody disputes. Can he win? He has significant financial resources and excellent lawyers. If he can demonstrate that he can provide a more stable environment, then I need to fight back. I need to fight back with everything I have. Sarah, be very careful. Men like Marcus don't like to lose. If you're going to challenge him, you need to be prepared for him to escalate. But Sarah was already done being careful. Marcus had taken her marriage, her home, her financial security, and her best friend. He was not taking her son. As she sat in her car on the side of the road, rain beginning to streak the windows, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She was going to destroy Marcus Rodriguez, using the same systematic approach he'd used to destroy her, and she was going to enjoy every minute of it. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been recommended by Patricia Wells as someone who specialized in helping women navigate high-conflict divorces. But Sarah hadn't expected her to look so young. At 45, Dr. Vasquez had shoulder-length black hair, streaked with silver, and kind brown eyes that seemed to see everything. Tell me about your support system, Dr. Vasquez said during their first session. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in the leather chair. My sister Jennifer has been amazing. She's letting me stay in her guest room, but I feel like such a burden. What about friends? That's complicated. Most of our friends were couple friends, and they seem to be staying neutral, which really means they're choosing Marcus's side. He's the one with the money and connections. What about your friend Bethany? Sarah's laugh was bitter. Bethany is marrying my husband as soon as our divorce is finalized. Dr. Vasquez made a note. That must feel like a double betrayal. It does. She was my maid of honor. She helped me pick out the nursery furniture. She threw my baby shower. Sarah's voice broke. How could she do this? People are capable of tremendous cruelty when they want something badly enough. But Sarah, I want you to know that you're not the first woman to sit in that chair with a similar story. Something in Dr. Vasquez's tone made Sarah look up. What do you mean? Dr. Vasquez hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. I had another client several years ago, Rebecca Rodriguez. Sarah's breath caught. Rodriguez like Marcus. She was Marcus's first wife. Sarah stared at her therapist, her mind racing. Marcus told me his first wife died in a car accident. Is that what he told you? Yes, he said it was too painful to talk about. so I never pressed for details. Dr. Vasquez stood up and walked to her filing cabinet. Rebecca came to see me about 6 months before her death. She was convinced that Marcus was hiding assets and having an affair. With Bethany? No, this was 8 years ago, with someone else. But the pattern was identical. The gradual isolation, the financial manipulation, the systematic transfer of assets. Sarah felt like the room was spinning. What happened to her? Officially, she lost control of her car on a rainy night and hit a tree, but Rebecca had been documenting everything. She suspected Marcus was planning to leave her with nothing, just like he's doing to you. Did she have proof? Dr. Vasquez pulled out a sealed envelope from her filing cabinet. She left this with me the week before she died. She made me promise to keep it sealed unless something happened to her. Sarah stared at the envelope, her heart pounding. What's in it? I don't know. I never opened it. But Rebecca said if anything happened to her, I should give it to Marcus's next wife. How did she know there would be a next wife? Because she understood who Marcus really was, and she wanted to protect whoever came after her. Sarah reached for the envelope with trembling hands. Her name was written on the outside in careful script for Marcus's next victim. Are you ready to see what's inside, Doctor? Vasquez asked gently. Sarah nodded, though her hands were shaking as she opened the seal. Inside was a flash drive, a handwritten letter, and copies of several documents. Sarah read the letter first. If you're reading this, it means Marcus is destroying your life the same way he destroyed mine. I'm sorry I couldn't stop him, but maybe I can help you fight back. The flash drive contains recordings of phone calls between Marcus and his offshore banking contacts. The documents show how he hides assets and manipulates financial records. Don't let him take everything. You deserve better. Rebecca. Sarah looked up at Dr. Vasquez, who was watching her carefully. She knew, Sarah whispered. She knew he would do this again. Domestic financial abuse follows predictable patterns. Men like Marcus are repeat offenders. Sarah clutched the flash drive. This could be evidence of financial fraud. It could be, but Sarah, you need to be very careful about how you use this information. If Marcus is as dangerous as Rebecca believed, you think he killed her. Dr. Vasquez chose her words carefully. I think Rebecca was a very intelligent woman who understood the risk she was taking. She still chose to document everything. Sarah thought about Marcus's phone call, his threats about custody, his systematic destruction of her financial security. If he'd done this before, if Rebecca had died trying to expose him. I need to be smarter than Rebecca was, Sarah said. What do you mean? I need to use this information without him knowing I have it. I need to be strategic. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. Sarah, promise me you won't do anything dangerous. Men who are used to controlling women don't react well when that control is threatened. But Sarah was already formulating a plan. If Marcus thought she was just another helpless wife he could discard, he was about to learn otherwise. Dr. Vasquez, I need to ask you something. If I found evidence of financial crimes, who would I contact? The FBI has a white-collar crime division. But Sarah, would they protect me if I became a whistleblower? Potentially, but there are no guarantees. Sarah stood up, suddenly energized for the first time in weeks. Then I guess I'll have to create my own guarantees. As she left Dr. Vasquez's office, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced since that devastating day at the doctor's office. Hope. Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated her. And now, thanks to Rebecca's foresight, Sarah had the tools to make him pay for that mistake. The only question was whether she was brave enough to use them. Sarah's world collapsed completely on a Tuesday morning in January. She was 36 weeks pregnant, staying at her sister's apartment, when the FBI knocked on the door at 6 a.m. Sarah Rodriguez, we have a warrant for your arrest. The charges were stalking and harassment. Marcus claimed she'd been following him, photographing his meetings, and threatening Bethany through social media. None of which was true. But Marcus's lawyers had crafted a compelling narrative supported by fabricated evidence. This is insane, Sarah told the arresting officer as they put handcuffs on her swollen wrists. "I'm 8 months pregnant." "Yes, ma'am. We'll make sure you get medical attention if needed." Jennifer stood in her pajamas, watching in horror as they led Sarah away. "I'm calling Patricia," she shouted. "Don't say anything without your lawyer." But Patricia Wells couldn't help from a jail cell. Sarah spent 6 hours in processing, her belly making it difficult to sit in the metal chairs, before she was finally allowed to make a phone call. "Patricia, they're saying I stalked Marcus. They have photos of me at places I've never been." "It's a setup, Sarah. Marcus is trying to establish that you're unstable and dangerous. But don't worry, we'll get you out on bail." Except bail was set at $200,000, far more than Sarah could possibly afford. She spent the next 3 days in jail, sleeping on a narrow cot, eating prison food that made her nauseous, and worrying constantly about her baby. Her cellmate was a woman named Rosa Martinez, in her 60s, with graying hair and gentle hands that had clearly seen hard work. "What are you in for, mija?" Rosa asked on Sarah's second night. "My husband says I stalked him, but I didn't. He's trying to take my baby." Rosa nodded knowingly. Rich men always got ways to make women disappear when they want something new. "Did you ever watch The Good Wife?" Sarah asked. "There's this character, Alicia Florrick, whose husband is a politician who gets caught in scandals, but she stays strong and builds her own law career." "I don't watch much TV," Rosa said, "but I know about staying strong. My grandmother used to say something that might help you." "What?" "She said that Maya Angelou lady had it right. You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "I feel pretty reduced right now." "That's because you're in the middle of the storm, mija. But storms pass. And when they do, you either come out stronger or you come out broken. That's your choice to make." On Sarah's third day in jail, while she was meeting with a public defender, Patricia Wells could no longer afford to represent her. Sarah felt the first sharp pain in her lower back. "I think something's wrong," she told the public defender. "What kind of wrong?" Another pain, stronger this time. "I think I'm going into labor." The next few hours were a blur of medical examinations, legal arguments, and emergency protocols. Sarah's son was determined to be born, whether she was in jail or not. Gabriel Chen Rodriguez entered the world at 3:17 a.m. on January 15th, weighing 6 pounds, 2 ounces, in the medical wing of the county jail. Sarah held him for exactly 20 minutes before the nurse took him away. "Where are they taking him?" Sarah asked, though she already knew. "Mr. Rodriguez has filed for emergency custody," the social worker said. "Given the circumstances of your incarceration and the charges pending against you, the court has granted temporary placement with the father." Sarah watched through tears as Marcus walked out of the hospital, carrying her newborn son. Bethany was with him, her hand possessively on Marcus's arm, already playing the role of mother to Sarah's child. But the cruelest blow came the next day, when Sarah was finally released on bail. Bethany had posted photos on Instagram and Facebook pictures of herself holding Gabriel, captions about new beginnings and instant love, and "some women just aren't meant to be mothers." The photos went viral within hours. Bethany's influencer friends shared them with hashtags like "worst crazy ex" and "worst gold digger gone" and "weren't upgrade complete." Sarah's mugshot appeared alongside photos of Bethany in designer clothes holding Sarah's baby in what looked like a perfectly appointed nursery. Sarah's phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Strangers were commenting on her life, calling her names, making assumptions about her character based on carefully curated social media posts. The final humiliation came when her 18-year-old daughter Emma called. "Mom, I can't deal with this anymore," Emma said, her voice cold. "Everyone at school has seen the photos. Everyone knows my mom is the crazy pregnant lady who went to jail for stalking her husband." "Emma, none of that is true. Your stepfather is lying." "Stop calling him my stepfather. Marcus paid for my education, my car, my college tuition, and now you're trying to destroy him because you can't handle him being happy with someone else. Emma, please, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Mom, you're embarrassing our whole family. The line went dead. Sarah sat in Jennifer's guest room, staring at her phone, feeling like she'd hit rock bottom. Her husband had taken her money, her home, her baby, and now her daughter. The internet thought she was a mentally unstable gold digger. She had no resources, no support system, and no idea how to fight back. But as she scrolled through the cruel comments and mocking memes, something unexpected happened. She started getting private messages from other women. My ex did something similar to me. Stay strong. I believe you. Rich men get away with everything, but sometimes they slip up. There are people who want to help. Don't give up. One message stood out. It was from someone named Rebecca, or Ghost 47. Check your hospital bag. I left you something that might help. Use it wisely. Sarah frantically searched through the few belongings she'd been allowed to take from the hospital. Hidden in a side pocket of the diaper bag was a small flash drive she'd never seen before. Her hands shook as she plugged it into Jennifer's computer. The drive contained financial records, recorded phone conversations, and documentation of offshore accounts that made Marcus's tax fraud look like child's play. He wasn't just hiding money from the IRS. He was laundering money for international criminal organizations. Sarah realized that Rebecca, Marcus's supposedly dead first wife, was still alive, still watching, still protecting other women from the man who had tried to destroy them both. And now Sarah had the tools to destroy Marcus Rodriguez once and for all. The only question was whether she was strong enough to use them without getting herself killed in the process. FBI Special Agent Maria Santos didn't look like what Sarah had expected. She was petite, probably in her early 40s, with short black hair and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of their surroundings. They met at a small coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from Sarah's usual haunts in Westchester. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, Sarah said, nervously sliding the flash drive across the small table. Agent Santos pocketed the drive without looking at it. Before we go any further, I need you to understand the risks you're taking. If even half of what you've told me is true, Marcus Rodriguez is connected to some very dangerous people. More dangerous than losing my son forever. Agent Santos studied Sarah's face. We've been investigating Marcus and his business associates for 3 years. Until now, we haven't had anyone close enough to the inner circle to provide actionable intelligence. So you'll help me. I'll help you help us. But Sarah, you need to understand that this isn't about getting your assets back or winning a custody battle. This is about dismantling a criminal organization that's been operating for over a decade. Sarah thought about Gabriel, now 6 weeks old, living in her former home with Marcus and Bethany. She thought about Emma, who still refused to speak to her. She thought about Rebecca, whoever she was, still hiding from a man who tried to kill her. What do you need me to do? Agent Santos pulled out a tablet and showed Sarah a series of photographs. These are Marcus's known associates: Victor Petrov, arms dealer; Chen Wei, human trafficking; Isabella Romano, money laundering. If Marcus is working with these people, your flash drive might contain evidence that could put them all away for life. What would that mean for Marcus? Life in prison, if we can make the charges stick. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction that surprised her with its intensity. And what would it mean for me? Witness protection, potentially a new identity, relocation, complete separation from your old life. What about Gabriel? If Marcus is convicted of the crimes we suspect, you'd have a strong case for regaining custody. But Sarah, you need to understand that going after these people means you can never go back to being Marcus Rodriguez's ex-wife. You'll be Sarah Chen again, permanently. Sarah thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, the woman who worried about which charity gala dress to wear, who spent her days shopping and lunching and planning dinner parties for Marcus's business associates. That woman felt like a stranger now. I want to do it, Sarah said. Are you sure once we start this process, There's no backing out. These people don't forget, and they don't forgive. They already destroyed my life. At least this way, I can make sure they don't destroy anyone else's. Agent Santos nodded approvingly. Then here's what we're going to do. You're going to go back to Marcus and apologize. You're going to tell him you were having a breakdown after the birth, but now you understand that he was right to take custody. You're going to beg him to let you be part of Gabriel's life. He'll never believe that. He'll want to believe it. Men like Marcus need to feel powerful, need to feel like they've won completely. If you approach him as a broken woman who acknowledges his superiority, his ego will override his suspicion. Sarah's stomach turned at the thought. And then what? Then you're going to slowly work your way back into his life. Maybe he'll let you babysit Gabriel occasionally. Maybe he'll ask you to help with some business tasks. He knows you're smart, even if he's been treating you like you're not. Every interaction will be an opportunity to gather intelligence. For how long? However long it takes. Sarah, I won't lie to you. This could take months or even years. And during that time, you'll have to watch Marcus and Bethany play family with your son. You'll have to smile and be grateful for whatever scraps of access they give you. Sarah closed her eyes, thinking about Gabriel's perfect little face, his tiny fingers wrapped around hers for those precious 20 minutes after his birth. I can do it, she said. There's one more thing. We'll need to set you up with resources. You can't do this effectively if you're worried about rent money and basic survival. I don't have any money. The FBI has ways of handling that. We'll set up a consulting business for you, something that explains a modest but steady income, maybe marketing consulting for small businesses. It'll give you flexibility and legitimate reasons to travel if needed. For the first time since Gabriel's birth, Sarah felt something like hope. When do we start one on tomorrow? But Sarah, I need you to promise me something. If at any point you feel like you're in physical danger, you call me immediately. Don't try to be a hero. These people have killed for much less than what you're attempting. Sarah nodded, though part of her wondered if she wasn't already dead in every way that mattered. The Sarah who had trusted Marcus, who had believed in fairy tale marriages and happy endings, had died in that hospital corridor when she watched him walk away with her son. What was left was someone harder, someone angrier, someone who had nothing left to lose. And that, Sarah realized, made her very dangerous indeed. As she walked back to her car, Sarah called Marcus for the first time since Gabriel's birth. Marcus, it's Sarah. I think I owe you an apology. The meeting took place at Marcus's office in Manhattan, a gleaming tower that reached toward the sky like a monument to his success. Sarah hadn't been there since before Gabriel's birth, and walking through the marble lobby felt like entering enemy territory. She'd spent hours preparing for this performance. Agent Santos had coached her on body language, tone of voice, and the psychological tactics that would make Marcus feel powerful and magnanimous. Sarah wore a simple black dress, expensive enough that Marcus wouldn't think she was completely destitute, but understated enough to show she wasn't trying to compete with Bethany's designer wardrobe. Marcus kept her waiting for 20 minutes, a power play she'd expected. When his assistant finally led her into his corner office, Sarah was struck by how tired he looked. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usually perfect hair seemed slightly disheveled. Sarah, he said, not getting up from behind his massive desk. You look better. Thank you for seeing me. Marcus, I know I don't deserve it after everything that's happened. She watched his expression carefully, saw the slight satisfaction that crossed his features when she acknowledged fault. I've been worried about you, he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. The arrest, the publicity, it can't have been easy. I had a breakdown, Sarah said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. The pregnancy hormones, the stress of the divorce, losing our home. I wasn't thinking clearly. I tried to make the transition as easy as possible. Sarah bit back the angry response that rose in her throat. Agent Santos had warned her that this would be the hardest part, swallowing her pride and anger to play the role of a repentant ex-wife. I know you did. I know you were trying to protect Gabriel and me, and I couldn't see it at the time. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her. What's changed? I held my son for 20 minutes. Marcus, 20 minutes. And in those 20 minutes, I realized that his welfare is more important than my ego or my hurt feelings. He's a beautiful baby. Perfect. I'd like to see him, Sarah said quietly. I know I don't have any legal right to custody, but I was hoping maybe you'd let me visit sometimes. Let me be part of his life somehow. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah could see him weighing the decision. She knew he was calculating how much access would keep her grateful and compliant without giving her any real power. Bethany and I have been discussing that, he said finally. We think it would be good for Gabriel to know his biological mother, as long as you can maintain appropriate boundaries. Appropriate boundaries, as if she were some distant relative being granted a favor rather than the woman who had carried Gabriel for 9 months. Of course, whatever boundaries you think are best. And Sarah, it goes without saying that any unpleasantness about our divorce would need to stop completely. No more lawyers, no more investigating my business affairs, no more social media drama. I understand. I just want to be a good mother to Gabriel, even if it's not in the way I originally imagined. Marcus nodded approvingly. I think we can work something out. Maybe you could come by on weekends, help with some of the baby care. Bethany's been feeling overwhelmed. Sarah felt a stab of vicious satisfaction at that admission. I'd love to help in any way I can. There's something else, Marcus said, his tone becoming more businesslike. I might have some consulting work for you. Nothing major, just some marketing analysis for a few of my smaller investments. It would give you some income, help you get back on your feet. This was better than Sarah had hoped. Access to Gabriel and access to Marcus's business operations. That's incredibly generous. Marcus, I don't know how to thank you. Just prove that you can move forward constructively. Show me that the Sarah I fell in love with is still in there somewhere. The irony of that statement almost made Sarah laugh out loud. The Sarah he'd fallen in love with had trusted him completely, had signed whatever documents he put in front of her, had never questioned his business dealings or asked uncomfortable questions about his associates, that Sarah was exactly who he wanted her to be again. I'll do whatever it takes, she said. After the meeting, Sarah sat in her car in the parking garage, hands shaking as she processed what had just happened. She'd gotten access to Gabriel and to Marcus's business, but the price was going to be higher than she'd anticipated. She would have to watch Bethany mother her son. She would have to be grateful for scraps of time with Gabriel while pretending that Marcus's generosity overwhelmed her. She would have to smile and be pleasant to the woman who had helped destroy her life. But as Sarah thought about the flash drive hidden in her apartment, about Agent Santos and the FBI investigation, about Rebecca somewhere out there still fighting Marcus in her own way, she realized something important. She wasn't the same woman who had signed those asset transfer documents without reading them. She wasn't the trusting wife who had believed Marcus's lies about protecting their family. She was someone harder now, someone who understood exactly how cruel people could be when they wanted something badly enough. And Marcus Rodriguez was about to discover that he'd created his own worst enemy. 2 days later, Sarah received her first babysitting assignment. She was to come to the house, her former home, on Saturday afternoon to watch Gabriel while Marcus and Bethany attended a charity gala. As she stood on the doorstep of the house she'd once considered her sanctuary, Sarah took a deep breath and reminded herself why she was there. This wasn't about getting her old life back. This was about justice. And justice, Sarah was learning, required patience, strategy, and a willingness to sacrifice everything for the chance to make things right. 6 months of playing the role of grateful ex-wife had nearly broken Sarah's spirit, but it had also given her everything Agent Santos needed. She had documented financial transactions, recorded phone conversations, and photographed documents that proved Marcus was laundering money for international criminal organizations. The breaking point came on a humid July evening when Sarah was babysitting Gabriel. At 7 months old, he was starting to smile and laugh. And every sound he made was like a knife in Sarah's heart. This should have been her everyday life, not a precious few hours stolen when Marcus and Bethany had other plans. She was feeding Gabriel his bottle in the nursery when she heard voices from Marcus's office downstairs. He and Bethany had returned from their dinner meeting earlier than expected, and they weren't alone. Sarah activated the recording app on her phone and crept closer to the baby monitor that connected to Marcus's office. She'd placed it there months ago, claiming it was for Gabriel's safety when he napped in his portable crib during business meetings. The shipment from Romania was intercepted. A man with a heavy accent was saying, "Someone tipped off the authorities." "That's the third shipment this month," Marcus replied, his voice tight with stress. "We have a leak somewhere in the organization. Or the FBI is getting closer than we thought," Bethany added. Sarah's blood went cold. If they suspected FBI involvement, her cover might be blown. "I've been thinking about Sarah," Marcus said, and Sarah nearly dropped her phone. "What about her?" Bethany's voice was sharp with jealousy. "Even after all these months, she's been very helpful with the consulting work. Almost too helpful. She's asking intelligent questions, providing insights that go beyond basic marketing analysis." "You think she suspects something?" "I think Sarah is smarter than I gave her credit for. And desperate people sometimes do desperate things." Sarah heard footsteps and quickly returned to the nursery, her heart pounding. She positioned herself in the rocking chair, Gabriel in her arms, trying to look like she'd been there the entire time. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "How's he doing?" Marcus asked. "Perfect angel," Sarah replied, proud that her voice stayed steady. "He just finished his bottle." Marcus stepped into the room, and Sarah noticed something in his jacket pocket that made her blood freeze. The outline of a gun. "Sarah, we need to talk." "Of course. Should I put Gabriel down first?" "No. Bring him." Marcus led her downstairs to his office, where Bethany was waiting with two men Sarah didn't recognize. Large men with cold eyes and expensive suits. "Sarah, I want you to meet Victor and Chen. They're business associates of mine." Sarah recognized the names from Agent Santos's briefing. Victor Petrov and Chen Wei, arms dealer and human trafficker. If they were here, in Marcus's home office, then whatever was about to happen was very serious indeed. "Sit down," Marcus said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Sarah sat carefully, Gabriel still in her arms, acutely aware that her son was now in the same room as some of the most dangerous criminals in the world. "Sarah, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need you to give me an honest answer." "Of course. Are you working with federal agents?" Sarah's training with Agent Santos kicked in. The key to surviving an interrogation was to stay as close to the truth as possible while omitting crucial details. "Marcus, I don't understand. Federal agents about what? About my business dealings? My financial arrangements?" "The only federal agent I've ever spoken to was the public defender when I was arrested. And that was about my stalking charges, not your business." It was technically true. She'd never spoken to Agent Santos about Marcus's business dealings in an official capacity. All their conversations had been about her cooperation with an ongoing investigation. Marcus studied her face carefully. "Victor thinks we have a problem. Several of our associates have been arrested in the past few months. Someone is providing information to law enforcement." "I wouldn't know anything about that," Sarah said. "I've been focused on getting my life back together and being the best mother I can be to Gabriel." Chen Wei spoke for the first time, his English heavily accented but clear. "Women make excellent informants. They are underestimated, trusted with sensitive information." "Sarah isn't smart enough to be an informant," Bethany said dismissively. "She can barely manage her own finances." Sarah felt a flash of anger at the insult, but she forced herself to look hurt rather than furious. "I just want to take care of my son," she said quietly. Victor pulled out his phone and showed Sarah a photograph. It was her, taken from a distance, entering the coffee shop where she'd met Agent Santos 6 months ago. "Can you explain this?" Victor asked. Sarah's mouth went dry, but she forced herself to think. The coffee shop was in Brooklyn, far from anywhere she would normally go. but it was also near a client she'd been consulting for through her FBI-created marketing business. "I was meeting with a client," Sarah said. "Brooklyn Community Wellness Center. They're one of my consulting accounts." Marcus pulled out his laptop and typed quickly. "Sarah's been doing marketing work for several nonprofits," he said after a moment. "The Wellness Center is one of them." Sarah nearly wept with relief. Agent Santos had been thorough in creating her cover story, but Victor wasn't satisfied. "There were other photographs. You meeting with people, having conversations that looked very serious. My therapist recommended I join a support group for divorced women," Sarah said, which was also technically true. Dr. Vasquez had suggested several support groups, though Sarah had never attended them. "I've been trying to work through my anger and depression so I can be a better mother." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "You've been in therapy?" "Yes. Dr. Vasquez has been helping me understand why I reacted so badly to our divorce. I realize now that I was wrong to fight you, wrong to try to keep you from moving on with Bethany." Bethany preened at the acknowledgement, and Sarah saw Marcus relax further, but Chen Wei was studying Gabriel, who was starting to fuss in Sarah's arms. "Beautiful baby," he said. "It would be tragic if something happened to him." The threat was unmistakable. Sarah's arms tightened around Gabriel protectively. "Nothing is going to happen to Gabriel," Marcus said firmly. "He's my son." "Of course," Chen Wei replied, "but accidents happen. Especially when people make poor choices about loyalty." Sarah understood the message clearly. Cooperate, or Gabriel would be hurt. "I would never do anything to endanger my son," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her terror. Victor and Chen Wei exchanged a look, then stood to leave. "We'll be in touch," Victor said to Marcus. "Make sure your house is in order." After they left, Marcus poured himself a drink with shaking hands. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he said to Sarah. "My business has become more complicated lately." "I don't need to know about your business," Sarah said. "I just need to know that Gabriel is safe." "He's safe as long as everyone makes smart choices?" Sarah nodded, but inside, she was screaming. She had to get Gabriel out of this house, away from these people, before something terrible happened. That night, after she'd put Gabriel to bed and said goodnight to Marcus and Bethany, Sarah sat in her car for several minutes before starting the engine. She pulled out her phone and sent a text message to Agent Santos. "They know something. Need to move quickly." The response came immediately. "Safe house tomorrow? Bring everything." Sarah looked back at the house where her son was sleeping, surrounded by criminals who wouldn't hesitate to hurt him if it served their purposes. Tomorrow, one way or another, this would all be over. Either she would finally have justice for what Marcus had done to her and Rebecca, and who knew how many other women, or she would be dead, but at least Gabriel would be safe. That was all that mattered now. 18 months later, Sarah stood in the green room of a Manhattan television studio, adjusting her navy blue blazer one final time before her appearance on Good Morning America. Her book, Frozen Assets, Thawed Heart, A Mother's Journey from Betrayal to Justice, had been on the New York Times bestseller list for 6 weeks. The FBI operation had been a complete success. Marcus Rodriguez was serving life in prison without the possibility of parole for money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy charges. Victor Petrov and Chen Wei had been extradited to face charges in 3 different countries. Bethany Williams had been granted immunity in exchange for her testimony and was living in witness protection somewhere in the Midwest. More importantly, Sarah had full custody of Gabriel, now 2 years old and thriving in their new life. "Ms. Chen," a production assistant appeared at her elbow. "We're ready for you." Sarah took a deep breath and walked onto the set, where she was greeted warmly by the host, Jennifer Martinez. "Sarah, thank you for being with us today. Your story is absolutely incredible, and your book is inspiring so many women who find themselves in similar situations. Thank you for having me." Jennifer, if my story can help even one woman recognize the signs of financial abuse and domestic manipulation, then everything I went through was worth it. Tell us about the Sarah Chen Foundation. Sarah smiled, thinking about the organization she'd built over the past year. We provide legal and financial resources to women who are being victimized by wealthy, powerful men. We've helped over 300 women escape abusive situations and reclaim their assets. And I understand you're engaged to be married again. Sarah's smile grew brighter. Yes, to Agent Maria Santos of the FBI. She's the woman who helped me find the courage to fight back against Marcus and his criminal organization. After the interview, Sarah returned to her Upper West Side apartment, modest compared to her former Westchester estate, but truly hers in a way that mansion never had been. Gabriel was playing with blocks in the living room, while Maria worked on her laptop at the kitchen table. "How did it go?" Maria asked, looking up from her computer. "Good. I think the publisher says the book is tracking to sell over 1 million copies this year. You've built something amazing. Sarah, the foundation, the book, the speaking engagements. You're helping so many people." Sarah settled onto the couch next to Gabriel, who immediately climbed into her lap. At 2, he was a beautiful, happy child with Marcus's dark hair and Sarah's green eyes. He had no memory of his father or the early months of his life surrounded by criminals. "Mama de read?" Gabriel asked, holding up his favorite picture book. "Of course, baby." As Sarah read to her son, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. She was no longer the woman who had worried about charity galas and interior decorating. She was a successful author, a sought-after speaker, and the founder of a nonprofit that was making a real difference in women's lives. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her publisher. "Oprah's people called. They want to do a full hour on your story. Congratulations." Sarah showed the message to Maria, who whistled appreciatively. "Oprah, that's huge. It feels surreal sometimes. 2 years ago, I was in jail giving birth. Now I'm going to be on Oprah." "You deserve all of it," Maria said, reaching over to squeeze Sarah's hand. That evening, after Gabriel was in bed, Sarah and Maria were planning their wedding when the doorman called. "Ms. Chen, there's a delivery for you. No return address." "I'm not expecting anything," Sarah said, but she told him to send it up. The package was small, wrapped in brown paper with no identifying marks. Inside was a jewelry box containing a beautiful silver locket and a handwritten note. "Congratulations on your success. You've done what I never could, but be careful. Some secrets never stay buried. A friend." Sarah opened the locket and found a tiny photograph inside. It showed a woman with short brown hair and kind eyes. A woman Sarah had never seen before, but somehow knew immediately. "Rebecca," she whispered. "What?" Maria looked up from her wedding planning notebook. "I think Rebecca Rodriguez is still alive." Maria frowned. "Marcus's first wife, Sarah. She died in a car accident 8 years ago. Did she or did she fake her death to escape from Marcus?" Sarah showed Maria the locket and the note. As an FBI agent, Maria's expression immediately became serious. "Sarah, if Rebecca Rodriguez is alive and has been hiding for 8 years, there's a reason. You need to be very careful about this." But Sarah was remembering her conversation with Dr. Vasquez, the flash drive that had appeared in her hospital bag, the mysterious messages she'd received during her darkest days. Someone had been helping her all along. What if she's been protecting me? What if she's been protecting other women from Marcus? Then she's been operating outside the law for 8 years. That makes her dangerous, even if her intentions are good. Sarah studied the photograph in the locket. Rebecca looked like someone who had seen too much, someone who had made hard choices and lived with the consequences. "I want to meet her." "Sarah, no. You have a good life now. You have Gabriel. You have your work. You have us. Don't go looking for trouble." But Sarah was already thinking about how to find Rebecca Rodriguez. Because if Marcus's first wife was alive, she might have information about other victims, other crimes, other women who needed help. And Sarah Chen was no longer the kind of woman who walked away from people who needed help. 2 days later, Sarah received another package. This one contained a simple business card with an address in Brooklyn and a time, Saturday 3 p.m. Sarah looked at the card for a long time, thinking about the choice she was facing. She could ignore it, focus on her new life, and pretend that Rebecca Rodriguez was just a ghost from Marcus's past. Or she could find out what other secrets Marcus had taken to his grave. Saturday was 3 days away. Sarah made her decision. The address led Sarah to a small coffee shop in Brooklyn Heights, the kind of place where freelancers worked on laptops and young mothers met for playdates. Sarah arrived exactly at 3 p.m., scanning the room for someone who matched the photograph in the locket. She spotted her immediately. Rebecca Rodriguez sat in a corner booth, her brown hair now streaked with silver, her face showing the lines of someone who had lived through trauma. But her eyes were alert and intelligent, and when she saw Sarah, she smiled with genuine warmth. "Sarah," Rebecca said, standing to embrace her. "You look exactly like I imagined you would. You've been watching me for years, since before you even knew Marcus was planning to betray you." They sat across from each other, and Sarah studied the woman who had supposedly died in a car accident 8 years ago. "How did you fake your death?" "Carefully, and with help from people who understood what Marcus was capable of." "Chaperon." Rebecca's expression grew serious. "I had evidence of his criminal activities, but I also knew he would kill me before he'd let me expose him. So you disappeared. I staged the car accident with help from someone inside the police department, someone whose daughter Marcus had hurt. Then I've been living under assumed names ever since." "Why didn't you just give the evidence to the FBI?" Rebecca laughed bitterly. 8 years ago, Marcus had friends in law enforcement, FBI agents on his payroll, judges who owed him favors. If I had tried to expose him then, I would have ended up really dead. But you helped me expose him. By the time you came along, his criminal network had grown large enough to attract attention from federal agencies that couldn't be bought. And you were smart enough to approach the right people. Sarah thought about Agent Santos, about the months of careful investigation that had brought down Marcus and his associates. What happened to the other women? "What other women?" "Marcus's other victims. You said I was what you imagined I would be, which suggests you've seen this pattern before?" Rebecca's expression grew dark. "There were 3 women between me and you. 2 of them took settlements and disappeared. One of them." "What happened to her?" "Lisa Martinez. She was a corporate lawyer, very smart, very determined to fight Marcus in court. She died in a house fire 6 months before Marcus met you." Sarah felt sick. "He killed her. I couldn't prove it, but I've been tracking his patterns for 8 years. Sarah, Marcus Rodriguez was a serial predator who used marriage as a way to steal assets and eliminate inconvenient women." "How many women do you think there were?" "Over his entire adult life, maybe a dozen. Most of them took whatever settlement he offered and signed non-disclosure agreements. They were too scared or too ashamed to fight back." Sarah thought about her own journey, about how close she'd come to accepting Marcus's version of reality. "Why did you help me instead of just letting me become another settlement case?" Rebecca reached across the table and took Sarah's hands. "Because you were pregnant. Because I knew he would try to take your child the same way he tried to take everything else. And because," she paused, her voice catching, "because I had a daughter once. Marcus made me choose between exposing him and keeping her safe." "What happened to your daughter?" "She's alive. She's 23 now, living under an assumed name in California. She thinks I died when she was 15. It was the only way to protect her." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "You sacrificed everything." "I thought I was sacrificing everything. But watching you fight back, watching you build something positive from the destruction Marcus caused, it gave my sacrifice meaning." "What happens now?" Rebecca smiled. "Now we help other women. Together. I've been documenting Marcus's past victims, tracking his associates, building cases against the people who enabled him. Your foundation provides the legal and financial resources. My research provides the evidence. The FBI won't be involved unless absolutely necessary. What we're doing now is about justice, not just law enforcement." Sarah thought about Gabriel, about the life she'd built, about the risks of getting involved in something that could attract dangerous attention. I have a son to protect now. I know, and I would never ask you to put Gabriel in danger. But Sarah, there are women out there right now who are living the nightmare you escaped. With your resources and my information, we could save them. Sarah looked around the coffee shop, at the normal people living normal lives, and realized she was no longer one of them. She was someone who had stared into the darkest corners of human nature and survived. That came with responsibilities. What do you need me to do? Rebecca pulled out a folder. There's a woman in California, Jennifer Walsh. She's married to one of Marcus's former associates, and I think he's following Marcus's playbook. She's 7 months pregnant. Sarah opened the folder and saw photographs of a beautiful woman with red hair and frightened eyes. She looked exactly like Sarah had looked 2 years ago. How long do we have? Not long. Her husband filed for divorce last week. Sarah closed the folder and made her decision. I'll call my publisher. Tell them I need to postpone the book tour. Sarah, are you sure you've worked so hard to build your new life? My new life only has meaning if I use it to help other people. 6 months later, Sarah stood in a courtroom in Los Angeles, watching as Jennifer Walsh was awarded full custody of her son and half of her ex-husband's assets. It was their 15th successful case. The Sarah Chen Foundation had expanded nationwide, with offices in 6 cities and a staff of 30 lawyers, investigators, and counselors. Rebecca Rodriguez worked behind the scenes, using her network of contacts and her 8 years of research to identify victims and build cases. Sarah's book had been translated into 12 languages. She spoke at conferences around the world about financial domestic abuse and women's empowerment. Oprah had featured her story as part of a special series on women who transformed trauma into triumph. But the most meaningful moment came when Jennifer Walsh called Sarah 6 months after her divorce was finalized. Sarah, I wanted you to know I'm pregnant again. Congratulations, how are you feeling? Scared but excited. This time, it's my choice. I'm with someone who loves me for who I am, not what I can give him. That's wonderful. Sarah, I need you to know something. 2 years ago, I was exactly where you were. Alone, betrayed, convinced my life was over. If you hadn't fought back, if you hadn't built the foundation, if you hadn't shown me that it was possible to start over, I wouldn't have had the courage to save myself. After the call, Sarah sat in her office looking at the photographs on her wall. Pictures of the women they'd helped, the children they'd protected, the lives they'd saved. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maria. Gabriel's first day of preschool went great. He wants to know if you'll read to him when you get home. Sarah smiled, gathering her things to leave the office. She had a son to read to, a wedding to plan, and a life that was fuller and more meaningful than anything she could have imagined during those dark days 2 years ago. But as she walked to her car, Sarah didn't notice the black sedan that had been following her for the past 3 days. She didn't see the woman with blonde hair sitting in the driver's seat, studying her through expensive sunglasses. The woman in the sedan was Bethany Williams, recently released from witness protection after providing testimony that had helped convict several international criminals. Bethany had spent 18 months thinking about Sarah Chen, about the life that had been stolen from her, about the revenge she deserved. Marcus Rodriguez was dead, murdered in prison 6 months after his conviction by associates who blamed him for their arrests. But Sarah Chen was very much alive, and Bethany Williams had nothing left to lose. As Sarah drove away, Bethany started her engine and followed at a careful distance. The game was about to begin again. Sarah Chen stood at the altar of a small chapel in Central Park, surrounded by the people who had become her chosen family. Dr. Elena Vasquez was there, along with Jennifer Walsh and 12 other women the foundation had helped. Gabriel, now 3 years old and impossibly handsome in his tiny tuxedo, served as ring bearer. Agent Maria Santos looked beautiful in her simple white dress, her FBI training evident in the way she constantly scanned their surroundings, even on her wedding day. Do you, Sarah Chen, take Maria Santos to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, Sarah said, her voice strong and clear. As they exchanged rings, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment 2.5 years ago. She'd been a broken woman giving birth in a jail cell. Today, she was marrying the love of her life, surrounded by a community of survivors who had become warriors. The reception was held at a restaurant overlooking the Hudson River. Gabriel charmed everyone by dancing with his new stepmother and announcing to anyone who would listen that he now had two mamas. Rebecca Rodriguez attended under an assumed name, sitting in the back and leaving before the cake was cut. But she left a gift, a silver frame containing a photograph of all the women they'd helped, with a note that read, "This is your real legacy." As the evening wound down, Sarah stepped onto the restaurant's terrace for a moment of quiet reflection. The city sparkled below her, full of possibilities and new beginnings. "Mrs. Santos," Maria said, joining her at the railing. "I like the sound of that. Any regrets about the path that brought us here?" Sarah considered the question seriously. 2 years ago, if someone had told her that her husband's betrayal would lead to this moment, to a career helping other women, to a love deeper than anything she'd ever imagined, to a sense of purpose that filled every corner of her life, she would never have believed it. "No regrets," she said finally. "Everything that happened made me who I am now. Even Marcus, especially Marcus. He thought he was destroying me, but he was actually setting me free." Maria took her hand. "What happens next?" "Next, we go on our honeymoon to Italy. Then we come home and help more women find their freedom. And we raise Gabriel to understand that strength comes from surviving hard things and choosing to help other people survive them too." Sounds like a perfect life. It is perfect, not because it's easy, but because it's real. As they stood together looking out over the city, neither woman noticed the figure watching them from the street below. Bethany Williams had been tracking Sarah's movements for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to make her presence known. Tomorrow, Sarah and Maria would leave for their honeymoon. Their apartment would be empty except for Gabriel, who was staying with Jennifer for the week. Bethany smiled as she walked back to her car. She'd waited 2 years for this opportunity. Soon, Sarah Chen would understand what it felt like to lose everything. But that, as they say, is another story. For now, Sarah danced with her wife under the stars, surrounded by love and possibility, blissfully unaware that her greatest challenge was yet to come. Because some stories never truly end. They just evolve into new chapters, and Sarah Chen's story was far from over. Private tarmac at JFK Airport, a $70 million Gulfstream G50 gleaming in the morning sun. Isabella Rodriguez Sterling, 6 months pregnant and radiant in Chanel, had planned the perfect surprise for her billionaire husband Alexander, a romantic early arrival for their Monaco trip. But when she boarded their private jet, expecting to find Alexander reviewing business documents, she discovered something that would shatter her world forever. Voices, intimate laughter, and then the devastating sight through the cabin door, her husband of 5 years locked in passionate embrace with Vivian Blackwood, his stunning communications consultant. But it wasn't just the affair that destroyed Isabella, as she recorded everything on her phone, trembling behind the bedroom door. She heard Alexander's cold, calculated words. "God, I can't wait until this pregnancy is over, and I can finally get rid of her. She was fine when I needed someone respectable, but she's too principled for what comes next." Her fairy tale marriage wasn't just ending, it had been alive from the very beginning. Like if you believe justice always finds a way, subscribe for more incredible stories of betrayal and ultimate triumph. This is how a victim became a CEO. The morning sun cast long shadows across the private tarmac at JFK Airport, where a sleek Gulfstream G650 worth $70 million sat gleaming like a metallic beast ready to devour the sky. Isabella Rodriguez Sterling adjusted her Hermes handbag over her shoulder, her 6-month pregnant belly creating a gentle curve beneath her cream-colored Chanel dress. At 28, she had the kind of effortless elegance that money couldn't buy, but could certainly enhance. She was early, deliberately so. The Monaco charity gala wasn't until tomorrow evening, but Isabella had planned this surprise for weeks. Hidden in her purse was a Patek Philippe watch, a limited edition piece worth more than most people's homes, carefully selected for Alexander's 43rd birthday next week. She imagined his face lighting up with that rare, genuine smile she'd fallen in love with 5 years ago at a Columbia Law School fundraiser. The marriage had seemed like a fairy tale. Alexander Sterling, heir to a $15 billion real estate empire, CEO of Sterling Enterprises, and consistently ranked among Forbes' most powerful men under 50. Their wedding at the plaza had been the social event of the year, with 500 guests including senators, celebrities, and foreign dignitaries. The penthouse overlooking Central Park, the house in the Hamptons, the ski lodge in Aspen. It was everything a girl from a working-class Mexican immigrant family could never have dreamed of. But lately, something had felt off. Alexander had become distant, cold. Their conversations revolved around charity events and business obligations, rather than the intimate talks they used to share about their future children, their dreams, their hopes. When Isabella announced her pregnancy 6 months ago, his reaction had been measured, professional, like he was approving a merger rather than celebrating the creation of their first child. "Mrs. Sterling," called James, the pilot, as he descended from the cockpit. "We weren't expecting you for another 2 hours." Isabella smiled warmly. James had been with the Sterling family for 8 years, had flown her and Alexander to dozens of destinations around the world. "I wanted to surprise my husband. Is he already aboard?" Something flickered across James's weathered face. Was it discomfort, embarrassment? "Yes, ma'am. He's in the main cabin with Ms. Blackwood. They're reviewing presentation materials for the Monaco event." Vivian Blackwood. Isabella's jaw tightened slightly. The 26-year-old former British model who had somehow maneuvered herself into the position of communications consultant for Sterling Enterprises 6 months ago. Coincidentally, right around the time Alexander had started working late and taking more business trips. "Of course they are," Isabella murmured, her hand instinctively moving to her belly. The baby kicked as if sensing her tension. "I'll just head aboard quietly. Don't want to disturb their work." Isabella climbed the aircraft's stairs, her designer heels clicking softly against the metal steps. The Gulfstream's interior was a masterpiece of luxury hand-stitched leather seats, mahogany tables, a fully equipped bar, and in the rear section, a private bedroom with a king-size bed that she and Alexander had christened on their honeymoon flight to the Maldives. As she stepped into the aircraft, she could hear voices coming from the main cabin. Laughter. Intimate, low laughter that made her stomach clench with an emotion she didn't want to name. Instead of announcing her presence, something made Isabella pause. Call it intuition. Call it fear. Call it the instinct of a woman who had spent months feeling like a stranger in her own marriage. She moved quietly toward the rear of the plane, where she could approach the main cabin from the back entrance near the bedroom. The voices became clearer as she approached. "God, I've missed this," came Vivian's breathy British accent. "These stuffy charity events are such a bore, but at least we get these private moments." Alexander's deep laugh, the one Isabella hadn't heard directed at her in months, rumbled through the cabin. "Monaco will be different. We won't have to pretend as much. Isabella will be too tired from the pregnancy to pay attention to what we're doing." Isabella's blood ran cold, her hand trembling. She pulled out her phone and activated the video recording function. Something told her she would need evidence of whatever she was about to witness. Moving like a shadow, she positioned herself where she could see through the slightly open door to the main cabin. What she saw made her knees nearly buckle. Alexander, her husband, the father of her unborn child, was locked in a passionate embrace with Vivian Blackwood. The blonde was perched on his lap in one of the leather captain's chairs, her fingers tangled in his dark hair. her red lips pressed against his neck. His hands were roaming her body with a familiarity that spoke of months, not moments, of intimacy. Isabella bit down hard on her lip to keep from crying out, forcing herself to keep recording. The phone captured everything: the way Alexander's eyes closed in pleasure, the way Vivian whispered things in his ear that made him groan with desire, the way they moved together like dancers who had rehearsed this choreography many times before. But it was what happened next that truly shattered Isabella's world. As they broke apart, breathless and flushed, Vivian stood and began unbuttoning her silk blouse. "Come on, darling," she purred. "We have 2 hours before your wife shows up. Let's make the most of it." Alexander stood, his tie already loosened, his shirt half unbuttoned. "God, I can't wait until this pregnancy is over and I can finally get rid of her." Isabella's hand flew to her mouth, but she forced herself to keep recording. "What's the plan again?" Vivian asked as she let her blouse fall to the floor, revealing black lace lingerie that Isabella recognized she had seen the charge on their joint credit card statement last month. "I'm getting tired of this secrecy." Alexander moved toward the bedroom, pulling Vivian with him. Isabella followed at a distance, her heart hammering so loud she was sure they would hear it. "Simple," Alexander said as they entered the bedroom, the same bedroom where Isabella had shared what she thought were loving moments with her husband. "She gives birth. I wait a decent interval. Then I file for divorce. The prenup limits her to 50 million, which is pocket change compared to what I'm worth now. She'll take it and disappear, grateful to get anything." Vivian laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "And then what, you make me the new Mrs. Sterling. Among other things." Alexander's voice took on a calculating tone that Isabella had never heard before. "You'll be the perfect wife for where I want to take Sterling Enterprises. Young, beautiful, connected to European money." Isabella was fine when I needed someone respectable for the social pages, but she's too principled for what comes next. "What about the baby? What about it? I need an heir. The kid will have nannies, boarding schools. I'll see him on holidays and special occasions. That's how my father raised me, and I turned out fine." Isabella felt bile rise in her throat. She was watching her husband, the man she had loved, trusted, planned a future with, discussed their unborn child like a business asset and her like a broodmare who had outlived her usefulness. But she kept recording. Some instinct, perhaps the lawyer she had once been before she gave up her career to be Alexander's wife, told her this evidence would be crucial. They moved to the bed, her bed. Their bed, and Isabella forced herself to capture several more minutes of their betrayal. Not just the physical infidelity, but the coldly calculated conversation about their future, about how they had been planning this for months, about how Vivian would gradually take over Isabella's role in Sterling Foundation, Sterling Enterprises, and Sterling's life. "I still can't believe she hasn't figured it out," Vivian said as she straddled Alexander on the bed. "The woman supposedly used to be a lawyer." "She's been soft ever since we got married," Alexander replied, his hands roaming Vivian's body. "Too comfortable, too trusting. She actually thinks I work late every night because I'm dedicated to the business. She has no idea I've been with you almost every evening for the past 4 months. What about when she finds out about the offshore accounts? When she realizes you've been moving money to the Caymans?" Alexander's laugh was cold, calculating. "By the time she finds out, it'll be too late. The prenup is ironclad. She'll get her 50 million and be grateful for it. The rest, the houses, the companies, the investments will be ours." Isabella had heard enough. Moving with the same careful silence, she backed away from the bedroom and made her way to the aircraft's exit. James was standing near the stairs, checking something on his tablet. "Mrs. Sterling, is everything all right?" "You look pale," Isabella forced a smile, though she could feel tears threatening to spill. "I'm fine. James, just morning sickness. I think I'll head home and rest. Please tell Mr. Sterling I'll meet him at the charity event tomorrow night." James nodded, though his expression suggested he suspected something was wrong. "Of course, ma'am. Shall I call for your car?" No, thank you. I'll take a taxi. As Isabella descended the stairs on shaking legs, she could still hear the sounds of passion coming from the aircraft. The man she had loved for 5 years, the father of her unborn child, was making love to another woman 30 feet above her head, planning to discard her like yesterday's newspaper. The taxi ride back to Manhattan passed in a blur. Isabella sat in the back seat, her hand protectively over her belly, watching the familiar skyline approach. The city that had once seemed like a promise of everything wonderful life could offer now felt like a gilded cage. Their penthouse, their $50 million penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, felt like a museum of lies when she walked through the door. Every piece of furniture, every work of art, every photograph of their supposedly happy marriage now seemed like evidence of an elaborate deception. Isabella walked to the master bedroom and sat heavily on the bed, the same bed where Alexander had held her when she told him about the pregnancy, where he had kissed her belly and whispered promises about their future as a family. How much of it had been an act? How long had he been planning to replace her with Vivian? She looked at her phone, at the devastating video she had recorded. 23 minutes of evidence that would change everything. 23 minutes that proved her husband didn't just not love her, he actively despised her, saw her as an obstacle to be removed once she had served her biological purpose. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing her distress. Isabella placed both hands on her belly and whispered, "I'm sorry, little one. I'm so sorry you're being born into this mess. But I promise you, something your father will never treat you the way he's treating me. I won't let him." Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "Slight delay with Monaco planning. We'll be home late. Don't wait up. Love you. Love you." The words that had once made her heart flutter now felt like acid on her soul. Isabella stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Of course, darling. Take all the time you need. I'll be here waiting." But as she sent the message, Isabella's expression hardened with a resolve that would have surprised anyone who knew her as the soft-spoken, accommodating Mrs. Sterling. She wasn't going to wait. She wasn't going to be discarded like a used tissue. And she certainly wasn't going to let Alexander Sterling destroy their child's future for the sake of his shallow, calculating mistress. The game was about to change, and Isabella was about to show her husband exactly how much he had underestimated the woman he married. The war was just beginning. Isabella spent the rest of that devastating afternoon in what she would later call her awakening. The woman who had walked onto that private jet was gone, replaced by someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. The lawyer she had been before marriage, the woman who had graduated summa cum laude from Columbia and had been courted by every top firm in Manhattan, was rising from the ashes of the naive wife she had become. By evening, she had made 3 crucial phone calls. The first was to Marcus Chen, her closest friend from law school and now CEO of Chen Media Group, Sterling Enterprises' biggest competitor in the media acquisition space. Marcus had been the one person who had questioned her decision to give up law for marriage, the one who had warned her that men like Alexander Sterling didn't marry for love, they married for strategy. "Isabella," Marcus's concerned voice came through the phone at 11 p.m. "What's wrong? You sound broken," Isabella supplied, standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse, looking out at the city lights that suddenly seemed cold and distant. "That's because I am Marcus. I need help." "Tell me." So she did. She told him about the video, about the conversation, about the months of lies and the calculated cruelty of Alexander's plan. When she finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Jesus, Isabella, I'm coming over." "No, Alexander will be home soon, and I can't let him suspect anything yet. But Marcus, I need to know if you still have connections at Morrison and Associates, specifically Elena Vasquez." Marcus let out a low whistle. Elena Vasquez was legendary in Manhattan legal circles, the divorce attorney who had taken down 3 billionaires in a Fortune 500 CEO in cases that had redefined how marital assets were divided in New York. She was expensive, ruthless, and had never lost a case involving infidelity and hidden assets. Isabella, Elena doesn't just take cases, she takes wars. Are you sure you're ready for what this means? Isabella's hand moved to her belly, where her son she had learned the gender just last week was growing. My child deserves better than to be raised by a man who sees him as nothing more than an heir to manipulate. Yes, I'm ready. The second call was to Elena Vasquez herself. Getting through to the legendary attorney at midnight should have been impossible, but Marcus had provided her direct number along with the code phrase that identified Isabella as a referral from his network. Ms. Rodriguez Sterling, Elena's crisp voice came through the phone. Even at midnight, she sounded alert and professional. Marcus Chen called ahead. He tells me you have a situation involving infidelity and asset concealment. I have a video, Isabella said simply. 23 minutes of my husband planning our divorce with his mistress while they're in bed together, on our private jet. I also have evidence of him moving money to offshore accounts. There was a pause. Can you be in my office at 6 a.m.? Yeah. Bring the video. Bring any financial documents you have access to. And Ms. Rodriguez Sterling. Don't let your husband know you've discovered anything. Not yet. We need time to build our strategy. The third call was to someone Isabella hadn't spoken to in 3 years, her brother Diego, a cybersecurity expert who worked for a private firm that specialized in corporate investigations. Diego had never liked Alexander, had always said there was something cold about him that reminded him of the old money families who had discriminated against their immigrant parents. Isa, do you know what time it is? I need a favor. Diego, a big one. And I need you to not ask questions until I can explain everything in person. Her brother's voice immediately became serious. What do you need access to Alexander's personal files, email, text messages, financial records, everything? Can you do it? Isa, what you're asking, if I get caught, if you don't help me, my son is going to grow up thinking it's normal for men to treat women like disposal objects. Please, Diego, I've never asked you for anything. 20 minutes later, Diego was at her door with a laptop and equipment that Isabella pretended not to recognize as highly illegal surveillance gear. By dawn, Isabella had more than just the video from the jet. She had 6 months of text messages between Alexander and Vivian, email exchanges about their future plans, and financial records showing that Alexander had moved over $200 million to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Luxembourg. He had been preparing for their divorce long before she discovered the affair. But perhaps most damning of all, Diego had uncovered communications between Vivian and a contact in Shanghai, a business rival of Sterling Enterprises who had been paying her for insider information about company strategies and pending deals. Alexander's affair wasn't just a betrayal of his marriage. It was corporate espionage that could land them both in federal prison at 6 a.m. sharp. Isabella sat across from Elena Vasquez in the attorney's corner office overlooking Manhattan. Elena was exactly what Isabella had expected: sharp, elegant, and radiating the kind of controlled power that came from destroying powerful men's carefully constructed lies. This is extraordinary, Elena said after reviewing the evidence. In 20 years of practice, I've never seen a case where the defendant documented his own infidelity and criminal activity so thoroughly. What can we get? Isabella asked, her hands folded carefully over her belly. With this evidence, everything. The prenuptial agreement becomes void due to fraud. He materially misrepresented his intentions and assets when you signed it. The affair documentation gives us grounds for significant punitive damages. The offshore accounts constitute asset concealment and fraud. And this insider trading scheme? Elena smiled, and Isabella understood why she had never lost a case. Ms. Rodriguez Sterling, we're not just going to win. We're going to make legal history. I want more than money, Isabella said quietly. I want him to understand what it feels like to lose everything, to be humiliated, to realize that the people he thought he could manipulate are actually smarter than he is. Elena leaned back in her chair. Tell me what you have in mind. Isabella outlined her plan. It was audacious, unprecedented, and would either make her the most celebrated victim of infidelity in modern history or destroy what remained of her reputation forever. You want to announce your divorce on live television, Elena clarified. During primetime morning TV, I want the world to see what Alexander Sterling really is. I want every business partner, every board member, every investor to know that the man they trust with billions of dollars betrays the people closest to him without a second thought. Elena was quiet for a long moment. It's risky. If this backfires, it won't backfire, because we're not just going to tell them, we're going to show them. That afternoon, while Alexander was in his office conducting what he believed was routine business, Isabella was across town at Chen Media Group's headquarters, working with Marcus and his production team to plan what would become known as the most shocking live television moment of the decade. Are you absolutely sure about this? Marcus asked as they sat in his corner office, reviewing the timeline for the broadcast. Once this airs, there's no going back. Alexander will fight dirty. Isabella thought about the conversation she had overheard on the jet, about Alexander's casual dismissal of their child as just an heir to be managed, about his cold calculation in planning to discard her once she had served her biological purpose. Let him fight, she said. I've got better weapons. That evening, Alexander came home with flowers, a gesture that once would have touched Isabella's heart, but now seemed like a mockery. He was in an unusually good mood, probably because he thought his plan was proceeding perfectly. How are you feeling, darling? He asked, kissing her cheek as she sat reading in the living room. You seemed tired yesterday. Just pregnancy stuff, Isabella replied, not looking up from her book. The baby's been very active today. Alexander placed his hand on her belly, and Isabella had to fight not to recoil from his touch. He's going to be strong, Alexander said. A fighter, like his father. Yes, Isabella agreed, thinking of the storm she was about to unleash. I think he's definitely going to be a fighter. I have some good news, Alexander continued, settling into the chair across from her. The Monaco deal went through. Sterling Enterprises just acquired 3 more properties in Europe. This could be the expansion that takes us truly global. Isabella smiled. That's wonderful, darling. I'm so proud of you. For Alexander noticed that her smile didn't reach her eyes. He didn't mention it. He was too busy basking in his own success, too confident in his ability to manipulate everyone around him, to notice that his wife was studying him like a chess player contemplating checkmate. There's something else, Alexander said, and for a moment Isabella's heart stopped. Had he somehow discovered what she had learned? I think we should go public with the pregnancy announcement. Do some interviews. Maybe a photo spread in Vanity Fair. Show the world what a perfect family we're going to be. The irony was almost too much to bear. I think that's a wonderful idea, Isabella said. In fact, I've already arranged for us to make an announcement. Tomorrow morning on Morning Manhattan, 8 a.m. Alexander looked surprised but pleased. Really, you arranged that without telling me? I wanted it to be a surprise. I thought it would be nice for us to share our good news with the world together. Alexander beamed, clearly imagining the positive press coverage, the way this would enhance his public image as a devoted family man. That's perfect, Isabella. Absolutely perfect. If only he knew just how perfect it was going to be. That night, as Alexander slept beside her, Isabella lay awake staring at the ceiling. In less than 12 hours, she would walk onto live television and detonate a bomb that would reshape not just her life, but the entire landscape of how powerful men thought they could treat the women in their lives. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Everything's in place. Legal papers will be filed the moment you go on air. Are you ready? Isabella typed back. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. The last text came from Marcus. Production team is standing by. The world is about to meet the real Isabella Sterling. As dawn approached, Isabella rose quietly and prepared for war. She chose her outfit carefully, a black Armani suit that emphasized her strength while still showing her pregnancy. Paired with the pearl necklace Alexander had given her for their first anniversary, she wanted to look like exactly what she was, a woman who had been underestimated for far too long. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Gone was the soft, accommodating wife. In her place stood someone harder, more focused, more determined than she had ever been in her life. Today, she whispered to her reflection, Alexander Sterling learns what happens when you betray a woman who has nothing left to lose. The revolution was about to begin. At 7:45 a.m. on what would later be called Black Monday for Sterling Enterprises, Isabella sat in the green room at Chen Media Group's Manhattan studio, her hands folded calmly over her belly while makeup artists applied the finishing touches to her appearance. She looked radiant. Pregnancy had given her skin a healthy glow, and the black Armani suit projected exactly the image she wanted: powerful, composed, and utterly unafraid. Her phone had been buzzing with texts from Alexander for the past hour. Can't wait to see you on TV this morning. Darling, you're going to be wonderful. Just left the office. Traffic is terrible, but I'll be there in time. Break a leg, beautiful. Our son is lucky to have such an amazing mother. Each message felt like a dagger, but Isabella's expression remained serene. Alexander had no idea that by the time he arrived at the studio, his entire world would be in ruins. Sarah Williams, the host of Morning Manhattan, entered the green room with her signature warm smile. At 55, Sarah was a veteran of morning television who had interviewed everyone from presidents to pop stars, but she looked unusually tense this morning. Isabella, are you absolutely certain about this? Sarah asked, settling into the chair beside her. Once we're live, there's no taking any of this back. The video you've shared with our legal team, it's going to destroy everything. Isabella met Sarah's concerned gaze with steady eyes. Sarah, 6 months ago, I gave up my legal career to support my husband's ambitions. I believed in our marriage, our future, our family. Last week, I discovered that he's been planning to divorce me since the day I got pregnant, that he sees our son as nothing more than an heir to manipulate, and that he's been stealing money from his own company to fund a new life with his mistress. She paused, her hand moving protectively to her belly. My son deserves to grow up in a world where powerful men can't simply discard the women who love them when they become inconvenient. If that means I have to be the woman who changes that world, then so be it. Sarah nodded slowly. Our legal team has verified everything: the video, the financial records, the communications between your husband and Miss Blackwood. This is going to be the biggest story of the year. Good, Isabella said simply. It should be. At exactly 8:00 a.m., Isabella walked onto the set of Morning Manhattan. The studio was packed with cameras, producers, and staff who had all signed extensive non-disclosure agreements. Even so, word had leaked that something unprecedented was about to happen, and the show's viewership had spiked to nearly 15 million people, triple the normal audience. Sarah welcomed her with professional warmth, and for the first few minutes, the interview proceeded normally. They discussed Isabella's pregnancy, her charity work with Sterling Foundation, and her husband's recent business successes. To viewers, it looked like a typical puff piece about Manhattan's power couples. Then Sarah shifted in her chair. Isabella, you mentioned wanting to share some important news about your family this morning. What would you like to tell our audience? Isabella took a breath, looked directly into the camera, and smiled with the confidence of a woman who had nothing left to lose. Sarah, I want to tell the truth about my marriage, about the man the world knows as Alexander Sterling, and about what really happens when powerful men think they're above consequences. Across Manhattan, in the Sterling Enterprises boardroom where Alexander was conducting an emergency meeting about a potential acquisition, someone's assistant burst through the doors. Sir, the young man stammered, you need to see this. Your wife is on television, and she's... Alexander looked up irritably from the conference table, surrounded by board members and potential investors. She's what talking about the pregnancy I already know about. Sir, she's talking about Vivian Blackwood. The room went silent. Alexander's face drained of color as someone turned on the wall-mounted television just in time to hear Isabella's voice, clear and unwavering. 10 days ago, I discovered my husband in bed with his mistress, Vivian Blackwood, on our private jet. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was listening to them plan my disposal once I gave birth to his heir. 15 million people watched as Isabella's composed facade cracked slightly, revealing the genuine pain beneath. I recorded their conversation because I knew no one would believe that Alexander Sterling, pillar of the community, devoted husband, could be so calculatingly cruel. Sarah leaned forward. You have evidence of this conversation. I have 23 minutes of video evidence, Isabella replied, her voice growing stronger. Video of my husband and his mistress not just betraying our marriage, but planning how to steal from Sterling Enterprises shareholders, how to hide assets from our divorce, and how to minimize his relationship with our unborn son to holidays and special occasions. In the Sterling boardroom, chaos erupted. Board members were shouting questions. Investors were frantically making phone calls, and Alexander stood frozen, watching his carefully constructed world crumble in real time. That's impossible, he whispered. She was never on the plane. She couldn't have. But even as he said it, Alexander's mind was racing back to that day, to the moment he thought he heard a noise near the bedroom, to James's odd comment about Isabella arriving early and then leaving suddenly. How had he been so careless? On television, Sarah was asking the question that Isabella had been waiting for. What do you plan to do with this evidence? Isabella's smile was calm, almost serene. I've already done it. Sarah, as we speak, divorce papers are being filed in Manhattan Family Court, along with criminal referrals to the FBI regarding the insider trading scheme that Vivian Blackwood has been running with Chinese competitors, using information she obtained through her relationship with my husband. The studio was dead silent, except for the cameras rolling. But more importantly, Isabella continued, I want every woman watching to understand something. We don't have to accept betrayal as the price of love. We don't have to smile and stay quiet when powerful men treat us like disposal objects. And we certainly don't have to let them get away with it. Alexander's phone was ringing nonstop. The Sterling Enterprises stock price was in free fall, down 30% in the first hour of trading. The FBI was already at the company's headquarters with search warrants. Vivian Blackwood had apparently fled the country on a red-eye flight to London, leaving behind only a note saying she couldn't deal with the stress. But Isabella wasn't finished. I want to show our viewers exactly what Alexander Sterling said about our marriage, our son, and his plans for our future, she announced, because the world needs to see who he really is. Sarah nodded to the production booth, and suddenly the studio's large screens were filled with video from the private jet. 15 million people watched Alexander Sterling, one of America's most prominent businessmen, plan the systematic destruction of his pregnant wife's life while making love to his mistress. The audio was crystal clear. She's too trusting. She actually thinks I work late because I'm dedicated to the business. She has no idea I've been with you almost every evening for the past 4 months. I need an heir. The kid will have nannies, boarding schools. I'll see him on holidays and special occasions. She'll get her 50 million and be grateful for it. The rest will be ours. As the video played, cameras captured Isabella's face, composed, dignified, but with tears silently streaming down her cheeks. She wasn't crying from weakness. She was crying from the relief of finally being free to tell the truth. When the video ended, Sarah's voice was gentle. Isabella, that must have been incredibly painful to hear. It was, Isabella admitted, but it was also liberating because it showed me exactly who I married, and it gave me the evidence I needed to protect my son from growing up to think that's how men are supposed to treat women. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Isabella looked at the screen, smiled, and answered it live on television. Hello, Alexander. Alexander's voice, broadcast to 15 million viewers, was shaking with rage. Isabella, what the hell do you think you're doing? Have you lost your mind? Not at all, Isabella replied calmly. I've found it. I've found my voice, my strength, and my self-respect. All the things I lost when I married you. You're destroying everything, the company, our reputation, our son's future. Our son's future is exactly what I'm protecting, Isabella interrupted. I'm making sure he grows up knowing that his mother was strong enough to stand up to a bully, even when that bully had all the power and money in the world. This isn't over, Isabella. I have the best lawyers in New York. I'll fight you on everything. Isabella's laugh was genuinely amused. Alexander, darling, you seem to forget something important. I used to be one of those lawyers, and now I have Elena Vasquez representing me, along with evidence of your adultery, your fraud, and your criminal conspiracy with your mistress. She paused, letting that sink in. The question isn't whether you can fight me. The question is whether you have anything left to fight with. The call went dead. Alexander had hung up, but the damage was done. 15 million people had just heard one of America's most powerful men reduced to threats and panic by his pregnant wife. Sarah turned back to Isabella with something approaching awe. What happens now? Isabella stood up from her chair, her hand on her belly, her head held high. Now I rebuild. I take back Sterling Enterprises from the man who was destroying it for his own selfish purposes. I raise my son to be better than his father, and I help other women find the courage to stand up when powerful men try to make them disappear. She looked directly into the camera, speaking to every woman watching who had ever felt powerless, discarded, or underestimated. To every woman out there who's been told she's too emotional, too difficult, too demanding for expecting basic respect, you're not. You're strong, you're valuable, and you deserve better than men who see you as obstacles to their happiness rather than partners in building something beautiful. As Isabella walked off the set, her phone was buzzing with calls from reporters, investors, women's rights organizations, and book publishers. The hashtag Washank Sterling scandal was trending #1 worldwide, and videos of her interview were being shared millions of times across social media. But the most important message came from Elena Vasquez. Preliminary injunction granted. Alexander's assets frozen pending investigation. Congratulations, Isabella. You just won the biggest victory in divorce court history. Isabella smiled, placed her hand on her belly, and whispered, Did you hear that? Little one, Mama just taught the world that nobody gets to treat us like we don't matter. The revolution had begun, and Isabella Sterling was leading it. 6 months after what the media dubbed the Sterling bombshell, Isabella Rodriguez Sterling stood in the corner office that had once belonged to her ex-husband, looking out over Manhattan from the 42nd floor of Sterling Enterprises. The nameplate on her desk read, Isabella Rodriguez, CEO. She had legally dropped the Sterling name as part of the divorce settlement, reclaiming her identity along with her power. The transformation had been remarkable. Under Isabella's leadership, Sterling Enterprises had not only recovered from the scandal, but had emerged stronger, more ethical, and more profitable than ever before. The company's stock price had rebounded to record highs after Isabella announced a complete restructuring focused on sustainable development, affordable housing, and ethical business practices. But the personal transformation was even more striking. Gone was the soft-spoken society wife who had deferred to her husband's wishes and opinions. In her place stood a woman who commanded respect not through inherited wealth or marriage, but through competence, integrity, and an unshakable sense of her own worth. A soft knock at her office door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, Isabella called. Turning from the window, Marcus Chen entered, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing the biggest smile she had seen in months. I just got word from Forbes, he announced. You made the cover, Woman of the Year, How Isabella Rodriguez Changed Corporate America. Isabella laughed, accepting the magazine he handed her. The cover photo showed her in a sharp business suit, holding her son Diego, named after her brother, who was now 6 months old, in the undisputed light of her life. The headline read, From victim to victor, the Isabella Rodriguez revolution. I still can't believe how much has changed, Isabella said, settling into her chair as Marcus poured champagne into two glasses. A year ago, I was planning charity galas and trying to be the perfect corporate wife. Now I'm running a Fortune 500 company and raising a son who will grow up knowing that his mother never backed down from a fight. Marcus raised his glass. To the woman who proved that the best revenge is massive success. They clinked glasses, and Isabella took a small sip. She was still breastfeeding and being cautious about alcohol. Through the windows of her office, she could see the construction cranes working on Sterling Enterprises' newest project, a complex of affordable housing units in the Bronx that would provide homes for over 1,000 families. It was exactly the kind of project Alexander would have dismissed as not profitable enough. "How's the little man?" Marcus asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. Isabella's entire face lit up at the mention of her son. "He's perfect, growing so fast I can barely keep up. And Marcus, he's such a happy baby, even with everything that happened during the pregnancy, even with all the stress and chaos. He's just joyful." The custody battle had been swift and decisive. With the evidence of Alexander's affairs, criminal activities, and his recorded statements about viewing their son as merely an heir to manage, Isabella had won full custody with Alexander, granted only supervised visitation rights 2 hours per week. He had exercised those rights exactly 3 times in 6 months before stopping altogether. "Any word from the ex?" Marcus asked carefully. He knew the subject was still painful for Isabella, not because she missed Alexander, but because she grieved for the man she had thought she married, the man who had never really existed. "His lawyers called last week," Isabella replied, her tone neutral. "Apparently he's living in a penthouse in Miami now, trying to start some kind of cryptocurrency venture. The SEC investigation cost him about $3 billion in fines and frozen assets. Plus he had to pay me the largest divorce settlement in New York history." The final settlement had awarded Isabella 70% of the marital assets, approximately $4.5 billion, plus the company, their homes, and $200 million in punitive damages for emotional distress. Alexander had been left with roughly $2 billion, still wealthy by any standard, but a shadow of his former empire. "And Vivian," Isabella's smile was sharp, "extradited from London last month to face federal charges for insider trading and corporate espionage. Turns out when you sell corporate secrets to foreign competitors, the FBI takes it very personally. She's looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison." The justice of it all still amazed Isabella. The woman who had helped destroy her marriage and tried to steal her husband was now facing the consequences of her own greed and betrayal. A soft chime from Isabella's computer indicated an incoming video call. She smiled when she saw the caller ID Diego Rodriguez, MIT. "Excuse me for a moment," Isabella told Marcus, then answered the call. Her brother's face appeared on the screen, beaming with pride. "Hey, big sister, I just saw the Forbes cover online. Mom's going to frame like 10 copies." Isabella laughed. Their mother had become something of a local celebrity in their old neighborhood, proudly telling everyone about her daughter who had shown those rich men they can't push around Rodriguez women. "How's the doctoral program going?" Isabella asked. "Great, but that's not why I'm calling. I wanted to give you a heads up. I just got a very interesting job offer. The FBI wants me to head up their new cybercrime division. Apparently, my work on your case caught their attention." Isabella raised an eyebrow. "You mean the highly illegal hacking you did to get evidence against Alexander?" Diego grinned sheepishly. "They prefer to call it innovative digital investigation techniques. Apparently, when you use those techniques to bring down corporate criminals, they're willing to overlook certain procedural irregularities." After ending the call with her brother, Isabella turned back to Marcus, who was reviewing something on his tablet. "What's that?" she asked. "Your interview request for this week? 60 Minutes wants to do a follow-up piece. Harvard Business School wants you to deliver their commencement address, and—" he paused, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Alexander's lawyer called. He wants to arrange a meeting. Isabella's expression hardened. Absolutely not. We have nothing to discuss. Actually, Marcus said carefully, it might not be what you think. Word is he wants to apologize. Genuinely apologize. His new venture is failing. He's been blacklisted by most of the business community, and apparently he's been in therapy. Too little, too late, Isabella said firmly. I've moved on. More importantly, Diego has moved on. We don't need Alexander's apologies or his guilt-driven gestures. As if summoned by the mention of his name, baby Diego's cry echoed through the office intercom. Isabella had arranged for a private nursery adjacent to her office so she could continue breastfeeding while running the company. It was exactly the kind of progressive workplace policy that Alexander would have dismissed as coddling. Duty calls, Isabella said, standing and smoothing her skirt. Will you wait here? I want to discuss the Stanford expansion project with you. In the nursery, Isabella found Diego sitting up in his crib, arms outstretched toward her. At 6 months old, he was already showing signs of the intelligence and determination that seemed to run in the Rodriguez family. His dark hair was exactly like hers, but his eyes were Alexander's green, a reminder that even from terrible situations, beautiful things could emerge. Hello, my love, Isabella murmured, lifting him into her arms. Did you have a good nap? Diego babbled happily, reaching for the pearls around her neck, the same pearls Alexander had given her for their first anniversary, which she now wore as a reminder of her own strength rather than her former marriage. As she settled into the comfortable chair in the nursery, Isabella reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. A year ago, she had been dependent on Alexander for everything: money, social status, even her sense of self-worth. Now she was one of the most powerful women in American business, a single mother raising her son with the help of a team she trusted completely, and most importantly, she was genuinely happy. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elena Vasquez. Just wanted you to know 3 more women have contacted our firm this week. Inspired by your story to leave abusive marriages, you're changing lives, Isabella. That, more than the Forbes cover or the business success, made Isabella smile. She had never intended to become a symbol of women's empowerment, but if her public battle with Alexander inspired other women to demand better treatment, then the pain had been worth it. After feeding Diego and settling him back in his crib for another nap, Isabella returned to her office where Marcus was still waiting, now joined by her assistant with a stack of messages. More interview requests, her assistant explained. Also, there's a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's about a personal matter. Her name is Jennifer Morrison, and she seems upset. Isabella frowned. The name wasn't familiar, but something about it nagged at her. Send her in. A few minutes later, a woman in her early 30s entered the office. She was well-dressed but clearly distressed, with the kind of nervous energy that Isabella recognized from her own darkest days during the marriage. Ms. Rodriguez, the woman began hesitantly. I'm sorry to bother you without an appointment, but I need help. My husband he's like your ex-husband was. Powerful, controlling, and I just found out he's been cheating with his secretary for 2 years. Isabella gestured for the woman to sit, her expression immediately softening. Tell me everything. As Jennifer Morrison told her story, a tale eerily similar to Isabella's own experience with betrayal, manipulation, and a husband who saw his wife as a possession rather than a person, Isabella made a decision that would shape the next chapter of her life. Jennifer, Isabella said when the woman finished speaking, you're not alone, and you're not powerless. I want to help you, and I want to help other women in similar situations. She turned to Marcus. Remember how we talked about expanding Sterling Enterprises into new areas? I think I know what our next venture should be. 6 months later, the Sterling Foundation for Women opened its doors in a gleaming new building in Manhattan. The foundation provided legal services, financial support, and counseling for women leaving abusive or manipulative relationships. It was funded entirely by Isabella's divorce settlement and operated by a team of the best lawyers, therapists, and advocates in the country. On the day of the foundation's grand opening, Isabella stood at the podium addressing a crowd of supporters, media, and women who had been helped by the foundation's early work. Baby Diego sat in a front row seat, held by Isabella's mother, who had flown in from California for the occasion. When my marriage ended, Isabella told the audience, I thought my life was ending too. I thought I had lost everything that mattered. What I discovered instead was that I had finally found myself. I had found my voice, my strength, and my purpose. She paused, looking out at the faces of women who had traveled from across the country to be there. Today, we're not just opening a foundation. We're opening doors for women who have been told they don't matter, that they should be grateful for scraps of respect, that they should stay quiet and accept less than they deserve. We're here to tell them and the world that those days are over. The applause was thunderous. But what moved Isabella most were the tears she saw in the eyes of women who understood exactly what she had gone through and how far she had come. As the crowd dispersed and the reception continued, Isabella stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. Marcus joined her on the building's rooftop terrace, where they could see the lights of Manhattan stretching out before them. Any regrets? He asked gently. Isabella thought about the question seriously. Did she regret marrying Alexander? Did she regret the pain and betrayal she had endured? Did she regret the public spectacle of her divorce? No, she said finally. Every terrible thing that happened led me to where I am now, led me to Diego, to this work, to the woman I've become. I wouldn't change any of it. Her phone buzzed with one final message of the day, from an unknown number. Misarna Rodriguez, my name is Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus. I saw your interview today and wanted to thank you. I left my abusive husband last month because of your story. I'm scared and broke, but I'm free. Thank you for showing me that it was possible. Isabella smiled, typed back a quick response offering help and support, then tucked her phone away. Tomorrow there would be more women to help, more businesses to run, more barriers to break down. But tonight, she was content to stand on her own rooftop, master of her own destiny, mother to a beautiful son, and leader of a movement that was changing the world one woman at a time. The girl who had walked onto that private jet 6 months pregnant and heartbroken was gone forever. In her place stood Isabella Rodriguez, CEO, philanthropist, mother, and living proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to stay down when powerful people try to destroy you. As she looked out over the city lights, Isabella whispered a promise to her sleeping son and to all the women she would help in the years to come. Nobody gets to make us disappear, not ever again. The revolution was complete, and Isabella Rodriguez was just getting started.